we're live.
Oh my gosh, you guys, we're so live. Hello, this is Danny, and this is
Dawn.
And we're so excited for everyone to be joining us on our very first For Fork's Sake, episode 1. Today, we're going to be talking about body politics, specifically disordered eating and our relationships to that subject. We have some really awesome ladies with us.
We do.
We sure do. I'll start myself. I'm Danny Bryant, and I'm eating with what we're eating because we're all eating dinner together.
Yeah.
I'm going to have some lentil soup.
Yum.
And some pita.
Yay.
And some hummus. It's going to be great. Who are you?
I'm Dawn Alden, and I am going to be eating, I passed a sushi place on the way, so I'm going to be eating some seaweed salad and some sushi assorted. And I also brought with me the people that I'm staying with. Their downstairs neighbor makes his own homebrew. So, oh, that smells good. I have some homemade honey mead.
Oh my gosh, who do you think you are?
Oh, yeah, it's good.
Let's go, Nia. You go.
Oh.
Hi. So I'm Nia Soto. I am eating a grilled cheese sandwich with some apple slices. It's super elementary school. Yeah, so I am a recent University of Chicago grad, undergrad, so I'm kind of interested in sort of the sociology of bodies, embodiment, that sort of thing.
Woohoo.
Let's do Laura.
Hey, I'm Laura, and I picked up from my favorite Mediterranean restaurant. Got a little pita, a little tzatziki going on, a little Greek salad with some Euro meat, and then I picked up yesterday in preparation some chocolate from my most favorite chocolate place in St. Louis called Cacao. So I've got like a sea salt chocolate here, something called the Little Red Riding Hood chocolate, which I felt like would somehow be appropriate for this conversation this evening. And I work at Castlewood Treatment Center. I've been there for 5 years. It's a residential treatment center for men and women with eating disorders, and often we treat the underlying trauma as well. I'm a fifth year PhD student, about to take my comprehensive exams at University of Missouri, St. Louis, and moving into dissertation stage.
Oh, I love it. And last but not least, Miss Andrea.
I am definitely eating a weird combination. I've got some mac and cheese, I've got some tortilla chips, and I have challah bread smothered in butter. So I'm a culinary genius.
And share with us the little tidbit that you shared before.
Oh,
Why you're eating?
I'm also 8.5 months pregnant.
Nice.
So hence also why I'm eating very strangely.
Do you know if it's a boy or a girl?
It's a girl.
Oh, yay.
So excited.
Yeah. And I'm a comic. I make fun of a lot of stuff. I also do PR during the day.
I love it. This is wonderful. And so we'll just keep eating and noshing, and America can just watch us eat. But I would love to jump in, and if we could each maybe just share a little bit about what drew you to the field that you're in, how you became really focused on that as kind of your topic of choice, and just a little bit more context of why this work is important to you, or this subject matter in general.
I can start because I don't have a field of choice, as I am a sarcastic person that very occasionally gets paid to tell jokes. I'm talking with my mouth full. I feel very rude. But I don't know. The topic is a topic that I've encountered throughout my life because, you know, just in being female, I've had several friends with body image eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, very sad, and also I am having a girl, so these sort of topics are very important.
Yeah. And I'll go. I didn't talk much about myself, but I run a theater company specifically where we focus mainly on food and body politics, and it's all based from my own struggle as a young adult, specifically really when I was in college is when it kind of all came to a head. I was trying to be a professional working actor, and that was my goal, and I was very much told that I should be a very particular way, and I got that in my brain until it pushed me to the brink of severe eating disorders that just kind of made me miserable. So it's been the last 10 years or so that I have been, you know, kind of coming out of that and actually finding that that trauma or that time in my life has really kind of where my best art has come from. It's how I've built the most community, and it really feels like the passion of the type of work that I should be doing because of my very personal experience.
I think something sort of similar happened with me because, like, being a recent college grad, I know, like, definitely towards the beginning of my college life, like, just the pressure to look a certain way, like, you know, on college campuses, how eating disorders are on such a rise, and, like, found myself, like, sort of chronic dieting, but then getting the okay from everyone, like, oh, you know, you're so healthy. But then, yeah, I kind of found that it fueled my research, but it was kind of an interesting position of being kind of like the researcher, but also the research subject. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. I was actually when I graduated from NYU, my master's degree is in drama therapy. And so I took a job at a hospital in Chicago, and I was primarily working with terminally ill and seriously ill children on the unit. But once in a while, we would get like a teenager who would have an eating disorder who would be coming through the unit and would just be on for like 2 or 3 days before we could, you know, the social worker could get them hooked up with a residential treatment center. I knew nothing about residential treatment. I never thought I was going to work with any other population other than terminally ill and seriously ill children. And I started to notice something really interesting is that when we would get these new teenagers in, the nurses or the doctors or the social worker would come up to me and say, you're not allowed to give any therapy services to that patient until they eat X amount of food, like until they eat an orange, until they eat whatever. And, you know, I didn't know much about eating disorders, but something sat really wrong with me about that. I was like, wait a minute, we're missing something. Something is getting missed in this. And so that kind of started my journey into reading and researching a little bit more about eating disorders. And then kind of right time, right place in my life came along. And there was an opportunity to move and take the job that I'm at now. And I've been deeply engrossed in the study and treatment of eating disorders for the last 5 years, doing both research and work every day with my clients. So that's kind of how it came to be. And, you know, I consider myself a feminist, and I think all things of the body, you know, are of interest to me, both, you know, from an eating disorder perspective, from disordered eating, and from our relationship with food and the body in general.
Very cool. Very cool. So I'm an actor and a director and a producer and a maker, I guess, is how I describe myself to people. I've always been a feminist activist, and drama and the media arts are the way that I express my feminism. So I have had the idea for this show for a long time. Many years I had originally conceived of it as a live theater piece, but then I met Danny through the interwebs. Yay, interwebs!
This is the first time we're ever meeting. She happens to be in Chicago from LA.
Yeah, just like 4 days. So we've been talking on the phone, but this is the first time I've actually met her in person. So, yay! So I contacted Danny, and we've been talking about it for like 6 months now, off and on. And we are so excited about this coming year, well, everything we've got planned.
Yeah.
And so excited to be launching it tonight with this amazing group of women.
Oh, so amazing.
Yeah.
So my first question for you guys is this idea of community and the communities in which women are given the opportunity to talk about this subject matter. And so I'm curious from you, the communities you've encountered where people are talking about these topics, what they're like, and what potentially is lacking in terms of opportunity for women to talk about body politics and to talk about their relationship with food that isn't at a diet club, which is my experience. Like, very much so, I often feel like the only place for women to get together and talk about body image is at a Weight Watchers meeting or at an Overeaters Anonymous meeting.
Right.
Right. And so I'm curious, you guys, about your own community and their relationship to food and the body.
I feel like a lot of women sit around at really fancy, decadent restaurants talking about their weight image problems.
Mm-hmm.
That's typically what
is that your community specifically?
That's a lot of what I encounter. You're sitting around, you get that delicious pork belly dish, and then you sit and you go, I shouldn't have eaten that, and then that leads to a very, very Jenny Craig-like situation.
Right. It's like confession time. Like, after you eat, you have to go to confession for what you ate.
Like, you shouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm. I totally relate to that. Absolutely. What else? Anybody else?
I don't know. I'm kind of in a privileged position because I run in a lot of therapist circles, and particularly in St. Louis with a lot of eating disorder therapists who work at the treatment center with me. And I think what strikes me the most is that when I'm with that group of women, that actually everybody is in a fairly healthy place with their relationship with food. So that juxtaposed with when I'm with a group of women who perhaps aren't therapists or don't work in an eating disorder environment, the difference in the kind of weight talk that goes on, right? And like being on a diet or exercising or all these classic conversations that people are talking about. And I just noticed the difference in how I feel in my own body when I'm in an environment that's, really supportive and where people get it and where we can enjoy food. And I think a philosophy we have at Castlewood is that food is pleasure, right? And it's meant to be enjoyed and, relished in. And so the way in which that community can support that really coming to life, and then how much more restricted I feel when I'm not in a community that supports that. And I'm particularly interested, like, for young girls, anytime I'm in, like, having an inside view into schools or to young girls, I feel like there's so little that is being done to provide a community for them to start these conversations, and the kind of like intergenerational conversations that I really feel like should be happening that are really missing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Right. I think you bring up a great point about kind of sort of like how the way you feel about your body is sort of context specific, like who you're talking with, what other people say. Because, having been part of the gender studies department at University of Chicago, I was very much privileged to work with people who were very interested in body politics, and like we would have very open discourse. But then, like, just in day-to-day life, like, you go out for ice cream and then someone talks about how, we really shouldn't be doing this, but then this is some sort of like forbidden thing that we're doing. But yeah, and there really is sort of a lack of spaces to talk about these issues. Like, I know for my research, like I look at pro-anorexia groups, and it's kind of like those are spaces where, because there is such a lack, like these spaces become very important for people who don't feel like they have anyone to talk to.
Yeah. One of the things that you wrote, Nia, really caught my attention. You were talking about how there is this eliding of the idea of diet and health.
Right.
That there's this sense that it's the same. We use the same language when we're talking about being healthy and dieting when women are involved, and that this sense that if you want to avoid the obesity epidemic, that the only way you can be healthy is to constantly be on a diet.
Right. It makes me think of this one thing I saw on a dieting board. Someone was saying something like, I love food, but I really want to, it was like, I want to lose weight, but I love food too much. Like, they're incompatible. Like, I want to be, I can't be happy until I don't like food, or I want to lose weight, so I shouldn't like my food. Kind of like this idea that, to be healthy is to self-regulate and to be self-disciplined and always watch what you eat. And it also makes me think of like looking at the covers of magazines, like health magazines, where it's sort of like, oh, the latest diet, or just kind of like sort of conflating the two, diet and healthy living.
Right. Well, and along those lines, oh, I knew this was going to happen.
The image that you see on Pinterest, that I don't know, I'm obsessed with Pinterest. I don't know if you guys are on Pinterest. P.S. I will unfollow any board that is about exercise or dieting, because I am not interested in that when it comes to my pinning time. But there's this image that goes around, and it says, I forget, some supermodel said, food doesn't taste as good as skinny feels.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's a rebuttal one that says, food doesn't taste as good as skinny feels except bacon.
Right. Laura, what were you going to say?
Well, like, also this idea that people are attaching things like being healthy with actually what is considered orthorexia. So people who then go into this all organic, all natural, all these like really extreme places, which is getting coded to people as being healthy, but actually it's just like another form of disordered eating, which is now being classified as orthorexia, right? So I just really interesting in how we code these things, and we're wiring them in our mind, how we're thinking about them as being healthy, but really it's a form of restriction.
Can you give a couple examples of, because I remember this because I was lucky enough to take a class with Laura. Could you give a couple of examples of the kind of coding that people are doing in terms of orthorexia?
I mean, I just think that, like, so sometimes we'll get a client who will come in and they're the client who, lives in New York City, and every single thing they buy is from Whole Foods, right? And so even though they don't have celiacs, they're now gluten-free, wheat-free, sugar-free, all organic, farm to table only. And I think things like farm to table are really wonderful, but when it becomes so incredibly restrictive that you're only able to follow those principles as your way of eating, it's a form of restricting ourselves again from the wide variety of foods, this idea of pleasure, and it becomes a way of, control and rigidity around eating patterns. So much to the point where all of a sudden you're not going out with your friends. I have a client recently who, was there that, doesn't go out to eat with her friends because they're all going to Sonic to get burgers, and she's not going to be able to get anything with them. So a perfect example is when you start to then change your social habits, you change your behaviors, all to map around and move around your food schedule to like stay with the rigidity of being orthorexic.
What does orthorexic mean? I've never heard that word.
Yeah, I mean, it comes from the Greek ortho, and it's basically, again, like these restrictions on types of food, so this very sort of healthy, pure, organic type of eating, when it's taken to an extreme and causes like some type of distress, basically, in being able to like carry out a regular pattern. It's a mindset of a rigid type of eating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really blurs the line between kind of what's considered like healthy eating and disordered eating. Yeah. Because like if someone doesn't know that it's sort of like the center of someone's life, like from an outsider's point of view, it's like, oh my gosh, like look at you, you're like super healthy, or like Yeah, it's kind of like this sort of normalization of disordered eating, but then it calls into question like what is disordered eating, and that's something I'm not even sure.
Yeah, and I think there are lots of different answers. I would love to maybe even dig into that. Like, what is disordered eating? Like I know for me, a personal example is when I was in the throes of my eating disorders, kind of my binge eating and bulimia. I was also doing Weight Watchers, and still to this day, I can look at any food and tell you like how many points are in it automatically. And, like my brain doesn't stop from doing that. Like I can't. I cannot. I can like look at everything and be like 6 points, 12 points, 1 point, 0 points.
How
And
much is it?
that feels that would be like 1 point. That's like a 1 point chip. Maybe like 1.5.
You're like a savant.
Yeah, so that to me is my own personal experience that feels disordered. Like I feel that is not normal for me, and I'm sure everyone has a different idea of that. But I would love to dig into that a little more. Any other ideas on that?
Yeah, I guess that the point that Laura brought up about sort of like how people, like once someone starts changing their sort of social patterns, I feel like sort of the social component of eating is super important and often gets overlooked. It's sort of like seen as this individual thing, but it's incredibly social. Like I think like once it becomes such a concern to the point where you're kind of like avoiding that social aspect of eating, that might be starting to verge into that sort of territory. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I think the way we classify disordered eating at the treatment center is, of course, the DSM is what's going to lead somebody to be able to have a diagnosis. And it's really an exciting year for the treatment of eating disorders because previously we only had anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and then eating disorder not otherwise specified. And this year there was the addition of binge eating disorder, which is really incredible that that's being added in. So I would say when I think about disordered eating, it's going to be any eating patterns or behaviors that, somebody's not going to classify or qualify as having an eating disorder, but has certain rituals or behaviors around eating that they need to find a sense of control, a way that it has to be done, and that maybe from time to time brings them out of normal patterns, but not to the point of marked severity.
Mm-hmm. And if I'm remembering correctly, like I remember reading an example of things of like villainizing food, of having a good food and bad, like qualifying food as like good or bad. Like that's kind of a simple and also like very common thing that people do. Another one would be like smoking, not for the love of smoking, but because it lessens your appetite would be an example from some of my research.
I think we as a nation have disordered eating. I think our obsession around everything that we do to lose weight and fad diets, etc. Yo-yo dieting to me is disordered eating. So any unhealthy relationships with food to me falls under the category of disordered eating. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a catch-all, but I think it's just a problem as us, as a society as a whole in many cases.
Okay,
Well,
so I'm gonna.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Andrea, go.
You hear. I think the thing is with me, as a layman, it's kind of like
Would that be lay woman?
the lay woman, obviously. It's kind of like what's the line, and knowing the line between, like you said, everybody has their, we're programmed to have an issue with food, which is so interesting because I'm trying to like build what I'm going to teach my daughter and healthy body image and everything like that, and it's like what is that line between, okay, I really shouldn't have White Castle again tonight because A, it's not really food, or B, I feel guilty about it. Yes, I love White Castle.
I think guilt is the kind of underlying thing that we've been programmed, and specifically I've been programmed as a child to feel guilty about food, you know, and my love of food and delicious food. What were you going to say, Dawn? You were going to ask a question?
Well, I think, Laura, did you have a response to that before I jump in with something new?
No, jump on in.
Okay.
I'm so jealous of your
salmon was really good. I'm
Yeah,
just saying.
salmon.
That
looks
looks
so good.
was pretty darn good too. The question is, let's even take it back a step further, because we're talking about this from sort of a heady place. For someone tuning in who's like, eating disorders, what are eating disorders? Can you tell me, okay, so what is an eating disorder and what makes it bad for you? If we're talking about just sort of controlling, like not eating White Castle every night, that's, is that an eating disorder? If it is, why is it bad for you? If we go down the path of an eating disorder, what's the end point?
Should I tackle that one?
Yeah.
Somebody else want to tackle that one? All right. So again, going back to the DSM, I think
What is the DSM?
Oh, right. The DSM is our favorite book within, it's put out by the American Psychiatric Association, and it's the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and the 5th edition just came out. And so this is what doctors use across the board to give diagnoses, and there's marked criteria for each section. So anorexia nervosa, there's two subtypes within it. I won't get into like all the details, but essentially it is a fear of being fat, and it is engaging in starvation of the body. Nervosa is going to be marked behaviors with binging and purging, so eating, binging on food, and then compensatory behaviors of purging, which can be self-induced vomiting, which can be laxative use, a number of different things. Binge eating disorder is when somebody eats more food than normal in often a fast-paced way, and has feelings of guilt and feeling bad associated with that for like a marked amount of time. So consuming large quantities of food, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's like more than X amount of times a month. And then there's a new name for the eating disorders not otherwise specified that's going to like kind of pick and pull different pieces, so those folks who don't fit into the 3 categories. And I mean, there's a lot of consequences in terms of eating disorders. Out of all of the mental illnesses, it has the highest mortality rate. So when you're starving your body, your heart stops. I mean, it's sort of as simple as that. When you're purging, I mean, I've had clients who come in who they have burned their entire esophagus. I've had clients who've had to get their stomachs replaced because the behavior, it takes the enamel off of your teeth, skin, hair falls out. With anorexia, for women, of course, not menstruating anymore. And we're also seeing a major rise in eating disorders in more than just women, but also in men. And there's a new branch, which is midlife eating disorders, which is women now using eating disorders as a way of coping with midlife issues.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, you do kind of, at least I always thought of eating disorders as something that happens to you when you're young, when you're a teenager, or when you're figuring out who you are and what you should be in the world.
Yeah, you always think about it's the teenage girl disease. I've never actually thought about it as like kind of a control for the midlife crisis situation.
Well, and full mouth talking. I knew that was going to happen.
Go for it.
I think the other really important thing to remember is that, for a long time, an eating disorder has been classified as like a white girl problem, but an eating disorder is a number of things. One, we already know that there's a genetic predisposition to having an eating disorder. So you've got the gene inside of you. It's either there or it's not. Then it's whatever happens. So it's, biologically plus what happens environmentally. So somebody might be predisposed with the eating disorder gene, and maybe it never blows up into a total eating disorder. It's the perfect storm of things that have the eating disorder blossom. So an eating disorder is a symptom. It's merely a symptom of something else that's going on, right? So often that is unresolved trauma. Often that's an attachment disorder. Often that is being bullied in school, some other type of trauma, physical, sexual, neglect. Sometimes it's actually a product of parents totally over sheltering a child, and that then when they go off to launch into college and they can't do it, the eating disorder becomes the way of coping. So I just think it's important to keep in mind that it's more than just control. I mean, often an eating disorder is a voice. It's a flag to family dynamics. It's the voice for a problem that's going on with the family at large. It's the tip of the iceberg, and once we get the families in, it's like the thing that's speaking to the family dynamics at large.
I think that's so important, because I do think that's the number one kind of thing that is attached to eating disorders, is that it is all about control. And I think it's so important to know how complicated and how many layers go into that actual experience of people who are kind of living through these disorders. I'm so interested in gender and the body. I'm so interested in and just how you said a rise in men. And so I'm curious what, and Nia, feel free to chime in too as well in terms of your research. Why do we think there's a rise? Is it that more men are being diagnosed, or do we really think that there is something shifting in our culture that is kind of rising up?
Should we blame G.I. Joe?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, and is it because sometimes it's exercise too, right? It's not always an eating disorder. Sometimes it's and I don't know if there's a specific name for that when you're addicted. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that in terms of men and body image?
Yeah, it's super interesting because I'm sure it's a multitude of factors. I'm sure that the diagnosis of men rising is also a major factor, but yeah, because we were just talking about how eating disorders are symptomatic of things in an individual's life, but it's also symptomatic of something in the culture and the society, and I think perhaps with the rise of this exercise culture in the face of the obesity epidemic and everything, where now exercise and maintaining your body is seen as not only an ideal, but this thing that you're kind of obligated to do, is possibly contributing to that. And I know even on it was kind of surprising, while I was doing the research on the Pro-Ana boards, over the course of my time looking at them, more and more men were appearing on those boards, stating that they also felt the sort of pressure to be thin, which was very interesting.
I hate that you said Pro-Ana board, it's so common. It actually has a shorter name. That actually makes me really sad.
Mm-hmm.
It's really sad. There's a whole culture around Pro-Ana. Sometimes we'll see clients come in and there's a whole secret language. They wear these little bracelets. And
Oh my God.
It signals to one another that they're Pro-Ana, and often our clients are going secretly at night going to the Pro-Ana sites and because they're really struggling with treatment. It's really wild.
It's sort of the internet is playing a huge, huge part in kind of the proliferation of disordered eating, in both genders, in all genders.
So,
Yeah.
Nia, go ahead and tell us some of the things that you see that you have seen on the Pro-Ana boards, the kind of language that is on those boards. We have all these little gnats here.
Little flies.
This is why we're doing this.
They really wanted to be in our video.
They wanted to eat, and they probably have something to say about what we
They're
ate.
Pro-Ana. Get them out of here.
Yeah, so I guess on the boards, I was so surprised. So my main project was comparing it to dieting websites, and what I found is they basically, in the Pro-Ana boards, the language isn't very alien. It's very familiar. It's common to the dieting websites, which I think says something about this sort of dieting health culture. The fact that they do share this language. I even saw like the same tips and tricks being circulated in both kinds of boards, dieting or Pro-Ana. It was very interesting, and it makes me think of what we were talking about earlier with this sort of like Jenny Craig kind of Weight Watchers, just sort of that how ubiquitous that kind of language is.
Yeah. And is it, I mean, do you find that the Pro-Ana boards are saying that that their pursuit of anorexia, their pursuit of this complete, you know, cutting out of eating of their lives, is that they're trying to be healthy, or is it more that it's fitting in with a societal image of what women should look like?
I think it's a little bit of both. It's sort of like, again, with the obesity epidemic, like the alternative, sort of like promoting the alternative, which is to pursue thinness as this sort of ideal. So then by aligning themselves sort of with this health dieting culture, it's kind of like, well, if we're in opposition to obesity, then there's something inherently healthy, perhaps, about this, is sort of the way that it's often framed.
Interesting.
Are there any other online communities like that for any other disorders besides anorexia? Is there a bulimic community? Is there a binge eating community? Which I think is actually interesting, because I can't think of anyone, and I know, was never like proud to have binge eating disorder and want to like share tips.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So I think
proud with
what do
bulimia. Yeah.
Are there other kind of underground communities that that you know of?
So I've seen pro-bulimia communities, and there's this sort of interesting social hierarchy in a way where pro-anorexia is kind of seen as this sort of ideal, and pro-bulimia is kind of almost, it's sort of asymptotic. It's like it's not seen as this sort of valued position. But in regards to the question of binge eating community, I've been studying a little bit about feederism, but they don't really align themselves as sort of like, they don't identify as disordered.
What is it?
Feederism? Have you ever heard of that?
No. Well, a little bit. It's a little bit sexualized, right?
Right. It's not quite in the same.
So like the thigh gap, how everybody's obsessed with the thigh gap.
Oh yeah.
That's a little different. Like feederism is, and I'm not going to give the clinical kind of fetish definition, but it's people who feed each other for sexual pleasure, either being fed, like overfed, or feeding is the.
Right, so it's not really aligned with sort of the binge eating, but it's sort of tangential.
But there is a pleasure that's gotten out of the overeating, as opposed to the guilt and the shame and the punishment that comes, which is totally different and interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
What do you guys, so in terms of your work and in terms of the communities that are not existing, so the work that you're doing, say Laura at Castlewood, when your clients leave, besides staying in therapy and group therapy, are there other options being created for people to come together to talk about the body and their relationship with food in a normal way, in a healthy way?
No, I mean, I think that that's something that's really lacking, which is, there was a while that I was working with some of my clients when they were post all the levels of care, and something that we were really struggling with was having a community of people to go to. And you know, I think, Danny, that's why your work is like just so important, because we were coming together and, you know, creating theater pieces, and, you know, I'm a drama therapist, so using drama therapy techniques as a way to continue to process their story and journey and create their narrative. But no, I think that that's really missing. I think that there are a lot of different ways that could happen. I think it happens in small scale ways. Once in a while you'll see a university do an art show, perhaps about the body, or commentary around that, or poetry, but I don't know, certainly not in St. Louis, not in a consistent enough way that I think is accessible to people.
Yeah. Nia, what about you? Any kind of, have you found any other sorts of communities doing any of the work, or even in the academic community? Are there people doing research in a way that is build a new community?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, body activism, fat activism is greatly increasing in academia.
Fat activism?
Mm-hmm. Like body positive, it's wonderful, and it's growing on college campuses. I know there are several sort of forums or possibilities or potential forums cropping up just in college campuses, and I think that's very important, especially for people at that stage in their lives, to have that as an avenue to talk about it.
Yeah, we're actually oh, go ahead.
I have a question. I'm so curious about this because, so I know of a lot of like recovery forums. There's actually a lot of recovery apps, but like the thing that I worry about is like the missing of the face-to-face contact, because in some way the eating disorder is often creating a level of isolation and aloneness. And like I think that there's something that happens in terms of getting lost in only getting support through social media, and that there's this kind of face-to-face in the space with one another time that's missing. But I don't know, Nia, I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, because I definitely agree that face-to-face contact is important, though for many people it's often difficult, especially in the face of if you're in a stigmatized position, or since just having an eating disorder is definitely something that is stigmatized in many cases. It's sort of like often having that internet forum is sort of like the a step in order to find people to talk to in real life or IRL, and yeah, it's sort of like different levels of interaction and support.
Yeah, and that idea of the fat activism and body autonomy is something I'm really interested in, and we're going to do a show about it in the next year.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'm hoping to get some people within that community who are so vocal and are so involved, because I think you're right. It's in terms of like themes and trends that I see in the body politics community, like that is something that is in full force with a lot of support and a lot of energy behind it.
Yeah, we actually, in doing research for this project, we came across a lot of really cool resources, one of which I just tweeted about it. It's called the Body Love Conference. And it's essentially a huge conference of people getting together and talking about loving your body as it is today at this moment, and all of the sort of freedom that comes from that.
I love that idea.
Isn't that great? Isn't that great? Body love.
I mean, I'm not an expert or anything, but the thing is, I am 8.5 months pregnant, and I have to say I'm freaking out about what's going to happen to my body after I have the baby. And so, you know, I've been trying to read a lot of stuff about, you know, your body's going to change and how they're calling stretch marks like mama stripes and everything. And I'm like, that's such a better way of looking at it.
I love that, mama stripes. That's
Mama
awesome.
stripes.
Yeah, I'm interested in from you, Andrea, because we're gonna wrap up in the next little bit. I'm curious about childhood, and I'm curious about seeds we should be planting in young people, young women, from motherhood, but also in schools. It's something that Laura, you brought up earlier, like there is an opportunity to have these conversations. And so I'm wondering, I would love to hear from you, Andrea, like already kind of what those ideas in your brain that are of being a new mother, and then from you guys, like what are some really tangible kind of things that we really should be talking to young men and women about in terms of their relationship to their body?
I mean, you know, one of the things that I've actually been reading, because, you know, it is very important to me that no matter what she looks like or anything like that, that she's, you know, confident and happy with herself. So, you know, one of the things that I've been trying to do, which is like really trying to read about how if they see their mommies, you know, you don't complain about your body in front of your child. You know, you try to look at the positive and and show her how much you love how you look and that you love your body. And then that'll even, just since they're little, you know, that'll even kind of instill in the back of their little impressionable minds. So I don't know. I'm, you know, just trying to think of all those little things because I'm not an expert. I really don't know. I figure the whole world's gonna. It's sad. The whole world's gonna tell her what's wrong with the way she looks and her weight and everything.
Right.
So the best I can do is really be at home and being like trying to instill that very positive body image.
That's fantastic. Yeah, one of my strong memories of my mother is when I was like 13 or 14, and I remember her, and I was going through the teenage stuff and, you know, all that sort of thing, and I remember her saying to me, yeah, I didn't really feel comfortable with myself until I was about 35. And just like in my little teenage brain, that just exploded. Like, not only is it difficult for women to be comfortable with themselves, but also the positive part of that, which was, I don't need to have it all figured out right now.
Mm-hmm.
I have time, and I will grow to love myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just such a, like, that hit me so hard.
Yeah. Anybody else, Laura or Nia, about seeds that the world should be planting in young people, and what should we be doing?
I mean, I guess I like what we were just talking about in terms of that. The thing I hear my clients talk about is, again, like, I think policies in schools around, like, eliminating fat talk, eliminating talk about the body in terms of these negative ways, and focusing on people who they are at their core, the kind of beauty and the humanity is really important, and celebrating all body types. You know, it's starting to happen in interesting ways, like obviously we all know of the Dove campaign, etc. But I wish that this was happening just more globally, and that teachers were more educated about I mean, I think if we could educate our teachers, even the way that how they're facilitating conversations and how they're keeping their ear out for these kinds of talk. The bullying, you know, there's so many studies being done on bullying, and so much of that bullying has to do with looks and the body itself. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think starting in ways in that way, and I also think, you know, young men and women need spaces to come together to have rituals around it. You know, I'm particularly been doing a lot of reading and going through a training right now, working with, you know, training young girls to basically, like, get to have, you know, like a period party, but not in, like, the corny way, you know, like the gross, obnoxious way, but, like, you know, in a way that really speaks to them where they're at, and creates an honest and open kind of authentic dialogue into coming into oneself. And I guess the thing that makes me really sad a lot of the time is people say, like, I'll love myself when my body is, when it's this, when it's that. And it's like, if we could really focus on teaching people to love it, their body where it is now, that's really setting the foundation. I think that makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Not, oh, if I could just lose 5 pounds now.
Yeah,
Right.
or, you know, like buying a pair of jeans and saying, oh, I'll be happy when I fit it. No, instead, like,
Why
you know,
would you do
like,
that? Don't torture yourself.
yeah, like the jeans you should buy jeans that fit you, and like really embrace your body as it is. But yeah, I love all of these ideas, you know, and sort of like increasing, sort of like coming up with these spaces, like maybe even on the day-to-day level, like with friends and family, and just sort of like normalizing the ability to talk about bodies, because I mean we see so many advertisements or things in the media pertaining to our bodies, but then when do we get to talk about them? So yeah, just having that sort of opportunity, like creating those spaces, like even on something as small as the daily level.
I totally agree. I think it's about facilitating that curiosity, right? Like, if we could even just help parents and teachers to be curious about what is your young girl thinking when she sees that billboard up there, or the magazine, or the Abercrombie and Fitch ad, like, just what are her associations like that? Just opening the dialogue is where we could just really bear to begin.
Yeah, absolutely.
Abercrombie. Ban all Abercrombie ads is where we can start.
Yeah. Actually, our next panel next month is going to be about media and advertising of food to women, and the whole idea of, you know, you can indulge, but only this much. Like, have that one piece of chocolate, and that's all the indulgence you're allowed as a woman.
Yeah.
So we'll be talking about that in depth next month.
And I'm just really interested in new stories about new types of women that are told in general. I mean, we all know that, like, Hollywood even making movies where women are the stars, they're just like coming around and being like, oh, those make money. But in terms of like young girls seeing their stories represented on TV or in film or even on stage is, to me, a place where I know that I can start, right? That's something I can do. I can literally do that. And so that's something that I feel really passionate about, is for young people, again, to show them different types of bodies on stage and different stories on stage, and because when they don't see those representations, it doesn't occur to them that they are okay, right? It's only until they see themselves in a heroic form or as an ingenue, sometimes that it clicks in.
Yeah.
That
there's a wonderful organization in LA called the G. Davis Institute for Gender and Media, and their sort of byword is, if she can see it, she can be it. And yeah, there is this necessity for women of all shapes, colors, sizes, ethnic backgrounds to be able to see themselves and their stories so that they can fulfill themselves, you know, that they feel that it's okay to be them. That they don't have to try to fit into a different box. That they are who they are, and who they are is wonderful and heroic and perfect.
Yeah.
Danny, I love everything that you're talking about around that. I think that we're really sitting on a cusp where there could be a really like exciting new explosion of like a new generation of feminists that are coming forward, and that we're redefining what that looks like and how that's going to be, and how we can you know, educate both our young women and young men. I think it's both, right?
Yeah.
So it's exciting time.
This is an exciting time.
It's an exciting time.
Absolutely. So we're going to, what we'd love to do is get you ladies, especially you, Laura, but Nia, if you have some as well, you could email us some links to some specific resources on the web. Like, definitely send us the link to your treatment center, Laura, and we're going to put those on our Facebook page so that people who have seen this broadcast will be able to have those resources right in front of them in case they have any further questions, or if they would like to read more, or perhaps you know, find out about any sort of treatment that they might want or need or want to investigate.
Yeah, and that's so important and so powerful, and it just, for me personally, it's fulfilling to get to sit with you women in this way. So I thank you all so much. And this will be archived right away, and so hopefully more people will watch it. And this is our first one. For the first one, can we just all high five our cameras? All high five our cameras.
Yeah. And thank you, ladies, and thank anyone who is out there watching live for bearing with us and our technical difficulties.
What are you talking about?
Starting 20 minutes or so late. But you know, we're figuring this stuff out as we go along. So next time, hopefully, we'll start right on time, and we'll be good to go.
And it'll be the 4th Wednesday of the month.
It'll be August 27th.
August 27th, 7 p.m.
7 p.m. Central Standard Time, which is 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'll be back in LA for that one, so you'll see lots of sunshine coming in through the window as I'm talking.
Anything else anybody else wants to promo before we go?
Yeah, and final thought.
Any plugs? Just life.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, you guys, we're going offline. Goodbye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.